Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we focus on real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Brissett. Derek, we've had some international action going on this week from both the women's and the men's 15s team. So, we're watching the women late on the Friday night and the men early on the Saturday morning. Basically, perfect for anyone on the night shift. But how were you able to cope with the?
That would be terrible for anybody on night shift, because you're on night shift. You're probably working through that whole thing. So it'd be terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, if you're starting at midnight, you may be able to get just the start of probably get the whole of the women's game. And then when you finish, you can just clock off and get in the men's game. How are you able to cope with the many start times?
Yeah, I mean, I think sleep schedule, obviously with the World Cup's been a little wacky. And then, yeah, obviously, I mean, waking up or staying up late for the women in the bronze final, and then the big watching England's streak come to an end in the gold medal game there. So that's obviously a late night, and then Canada, just the men's team making you wake up bright and early again. They made that at least they made that worth waking up for, so that was fun. Mm-hmm. A couple excellent games, and then I mean a lot of fun rugby across the entire international scene, I guess. Autumn Nations tournament was pretty good too. Some fun premiership games as well. This is kind of going to be a pretty packed episode, man. It's a big MLR week too, with the schedule drop and the dispersal / expansion drafts on top of these two both Canadian national teams in action. So it's plenty to get into here. I cracked a beer for this one. I don't usually crack a beer to record the podcast, but it felt like there's so much fun stuff that it's probably worth the cause.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm doing the opposite. I'm only on the water. I'm staying sober until Christmas. So trying to lose a few pounds and then immedially put it on Christmas Day.
Is that what it is? Is that like a Lent thing? I guess that's not really a Lent thing. Lent's Easter, right?
Nah,
I guess that's
I think it's more that my liver just needs a break. So that's what we're going.
See, I'm usually just drinking water during these, so I guess we're switching some roles up, I guess.
I guess we are. Right. Okay, but let's get into it. We had the finals of the Women's World Cup, both games taking place at Eden Park. And we started off with the bronze final, and it was France against Canada. So, after the loss to England, and France has now lost to New Zealand, it's something to go for with the bronze medal matches. I know that when it's the Men's World Cup, they speak disparagingly about it, but I still feel as though it's still something for teams to prove that they've gotten something out of it. But that's just my opinion. However, this brings back into conversation the discussion between a fully professional team and a semi-pro at best team, because Canada, honestly, they looked drained from about 5 minutes in. It was clearly obvious to anyone who watched the game last week that Canada had put everything on the line to try and make the final. And yeah, it's a week turnaround. So, trying to get your mind back into the mentality of being able to play one more game and hopefully get another victory. But when the other team has been in an environment of which they've been able to recover much faster as a result, it really showed in this instance, because France just attacked and never gave anything to the Maple Leafs at all. It was at points painful to watch, especially. It was a tough game to watch. I mean, it's not just the fatigue of the Canadian players, it's also, as a result, a litany of errors that happened as well. Like the line out, which used to be such a mainstay and a, next to guarantee for Canada, was just overthrown on multiple occasions and just didn't come together. And it wasn't perfect from France either. Like they got a yellow card in the 66th minute as well.
Yeah.
And at the end, they'd put their entire bench on the pitch, and then someone had to go off for a HIA, so they were down a player for the remainder of the game. But ultimately, they were better prepared coming into this fixture. They, like I said, they've been professional for at least the past year. I think it was their game against New Zealand in the end of year internationals in last year that really cemented how far they'd come from being professional. And every people were talking about France as being like one of the contenders for the final. And if you saw their match against New Zealand last week, you know that if that kick had gone a few meters to the right, they would have been in the final. Yeah, and absolutely, formidable by Les Bleus. But yeah, it's because this is the thing. Normally, this is the part where I talk about like, this try scored by Canada was great, or they got this penalty. Nothing. The final score was 36-0. I can't talk about scores if Canada don't score anything. And I think personally, when it was getting to, I think it was within like the final 10 or 15 minutes, and Canada had a penalty within kicking range of the goalpost. Part of me was like, just kick the post, just have something that isn't a zero.
You were upset about this. You were like,
I was kind of upset because from my perspective, okay, 36-3 isn't a lot, but it's still better than 36-0.
No.
But then again, at that point, if you're already 36 points down, a player's been yellow carded, then in your mind it's like, well, if it doesn't make any difference in the end, we may as well go for a try and see if we can get a score that way. Because 36-3 may not be great, but 36-7 or 36-5 is better than 36-3.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I believe when you were texting me that was super late in the game, and I was like, it's over anyways. Yeah. Like it's no matter, like, I mean, I think I don't even remember what penalty you're talking about. I just remember you texting me and being upset about it. And I was like, it's like the game's over at this point. Whether you lose 36-3 or 36 like 5 or 36-0 trying to go for 5, that's, at the end of the day, it's a loss. I mean, yeah, not a whole lot of scoring, obviously, on the Canadian side. Yeah. France looked very good in this game. They got tries from Fall, Bourdon, Menninger had 2, and Deschamps had 1 as well. So those are the 5 tries for France. Drouin did very well kicking. I guess making up for last week, unfortunately. But realistically, I think I get your sentiment of what you're talking about, the professionalism and stuff. I thought Squidge kind of had a funny tweet where he said this Canadian performance is arguably a better advertisement for why they need to professionalize than last week. Yeah, it's probably true. I just think, like, watching this game, and I mean, like you said, there's not really a whole lot to really say about it, right? Yeah. It's like it's the bronze medal at the World Cup. And France, especially Bourdon, played unreal, but France dominated this game. Start to finish, all 80 minutes was just all France. Completely dominated every aspect of the game. Toward the end of the game too, Canada, kind of that 7-1 split on the bench. That's very unorthodox, but has been working out so far. I don't really know if it caught up to them in this game a little bit. But
I think that because there was very few changes from between games as well, and the backs had already been depleted like earlier in the tournament as well.
But it's also like the French backs were the dominant catalyst for their win, right?
I will say one thing that happened is that Bourdon got named like player of the match with at least 9 minutes to go. And I don't know if that's like, oh, she's so impressive that no one can catch up to what she's done in this game, or it just really undermines the rest of the French players of there's nothing they can do to catch up to what she's done. I was like, can you at least wait till like the 79th minute? I thought that was a bit rude. Come on.
I feel like in a 36-0 win, you probably have a good idea of who the player because she didn't even play the whole game. Like she played out. Let me double check this. Like she came out in the 62nd minute.
Yeah, whatever. So I think she played an hour, and then they were 10 minutes later. They're like, "Oh, she's player of the match." And
it was a good hour. It was a good hour. Right. So obviously she set up a couple tries. She scored a try.
Madisou Fall played the entire 80 minutes. Didn't even get a mention. Not even.
She was on the team of the World Cup though. Fall, right? So that works out for the. They all got the recognition.
Fine, swings and roundabouts, as they say.
Yeah, I guess so. I think like the one thing though is it's like obviously like this game wasn't great. One thing that I did love at the end of the game though, Sophie de Goody out of the back of the ruck with like a 60-meter kick deep inside French territory, and then runs down, and is in the first, I think the first breakdown. After that, chases it down and gets a breakdown steal, which set up a Canadian penalty, which they, ultimately didn't capitalize on. But like that whole play is just, she's nominated for women's World Player of the Year. If she doesn't win, I'm flying to World Rugby headquarters and like burning it.
I fully agree with that sentiment.
Yeah,
and I would be getting a flight as well.
Yeah,
I think the
she's
thing is
on the planet. Like
that is true, but I think the issue when it comes to things like essentially when it comes to like the World Player of the Year and stuff like that, more often than not, because it's not a open vote, it's decided.
It's interesting that the women have 4 or 5 nominees, and every other award category is like 4.
Yeah, also, I thought that was interesting.
Canada got robbed in this Try of the Year category.
Karen Paquin did a Try of the Year so good, she did it twice.
Yeah, just robbery that neither one of those is included. Abby Dow's going to win, though. But she has
Abby Dow.
I'm just mad that Canada didn't get nominated, but Abby Dow's going to win that. Yeah, so that play from De Goody was amazing. To me it was a really big bright spot, and then obviously like super big bright spot is some of the recognition that players are getting, being included on the Alyssa Hallery also got included on that team of the World Cup, right, and then obviously the big one being De Goody being nominated for Player of the Year, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, so the original point I was making is that when it comes to Player of the Year, especially in a World Cup year, it's usually from the team that's won the World Cup.
It is.
Because
this case, the best player in the world does not play for that team.
It doesn't always hold true. For example, Thierry Dusautoir was Player of the Year in 2011. Very much not a Kiwi who won that.
I was going to say, who are the New Zealand nominees for Player of the Year? Is it Woodman?
Portia Woodman and Ruhe Demont.
I love Woodman's unreal.
And
Woodman's unreal, but she's the second best player in the world. I'm not going to like fall. This is a hill I will die on, is that Sophie de Goody is the best player in the world. I'm including men in this, by the way. She's the best player.
No, I agree with that, because the men's list is Lucanio Am, which is pretty fair. Antoine Dupont, which is also pretty fair. Johnny Sexton, maybe a couple of years gone by. Okay. And Josh van der Fleer, who's all right, but
all right.
Player of the Sophie Sexton, of those 9.
I was to say, can Sexton, Am, or Dupont like win breakdown battles like a flanker or whatever? Who was there a forward in that mix? Who was the last player that you said? Is that
Josh van der Fleer? That's it. I know so little of this player. I've already disregarded him. So,
It's like, yeah, whatever. Something to get, yeah. But it's like, yeah. So it's like that's the whole thing, though. It's like pick a back in the world and like compare, and then add like ability in the breakdown to that,
yeah,
and tackling ability. Pick a forward and add like any kicking skill, or
yeah,
even with ball in hand. It's on just pick one. You can't match it.
yeah,
So it's yeah. She's obviously a phenomenal player, fully deserves that. She completely has my vote. If I got to vote on this, it's to her for sure. I think the biggest thing is obviously, it's a disappointing loss. Right, disappointing way to end what it was really a great tournament for the Canadian team. Um, and it's I just we said a lot of things last week
yeah,
about just how proud we are of the team, how excited we are for the future of the team, how we want to leverage, how Rugby Canada needs to find a way to leverage this into more funding,
mm,
where to get more
yeah,
funding, how to get this women's team a little bit more funding too. And World Rugby too, I think needs to like fully invest in this as well.
yeah.
And
No,
like I don't think it's just on
absolutely.
Rugby Canada or whatever. I think this is a World Rugby thing. World Rugby's got to throw money at this, and World Rugby's
Yeah,
got to throw, especially throwing money, because we all know that on the men's side, a lot of things is determined. Like the funding World Rugby gives you, a lot of that is determined based on the performance of the men's team. And
yeah,
like for Canada or for Italy, countries like that, the women's team is a lot better. And
yeah,
that funding model maybe needs to reflect the fact that, certain countries are going to have women's teams that are better, at least as far as their performance on the world stage goes.
yeah.
But I think like,
So,
I just don't want to
um,
like lose people to like, I know it's a tough kind of momentum killer to end the World Cup on a 36-0 blowout loss. But
yeah,
I really just, and I mean, I don't necessarily want to repeat everything we said last week, because we said it last week and you can go back and listen to it all. I
yeah,
just don't want to lose any of that like momentum or that energy. That, yeah, man, we got to continue to support this team. And if like, I mean, I'm gonna admit that I don't really know the inner workings of the finances of Rugby Canada,
yeah,
or how that works. So I'm not gonna like, and I don't know where the money could actually come from, but just a generic, we got to find a way to up some funding and stuff. As
yeah.
this team deserves it. And
Absolutely.
as I said last week too, as a little side of this is like all the senior teams deserve it. Men's, then the 2 sevens teams as well. They
Yeah,
all deserve a little bit more funding, but it really shows for the women's team right now, considering how well they're performing despite, you know, being maybe underfunded compared to the teams that got to the podium at the World Cup.
yeah. So Scrum Queens actually did a post World Cup analysis of where each of the 12 teams needs to go from here. So for New Zealand and England, it is basically, keep the marketing going, keep
Yeah.
the money going as well, because it's, so, obviously New Zealand had a lot of like young players coming, like Ruby Tui, has obviously been a shining light for the 15s team.
She's
England as
unreal.
well. Pardon?
I just said she's unreal.
Oh yeah, no, she was fantastic. England, for example, there was a number of players who have played now in the 2017 and 21 World Cup finals, and not to disparage them, but maybe it's time to be focusing on like the next cycle, especially with England hosting next World Cup.
Yep.
So they need to focus on like their marketing and stuff. France, they're saying it's a bit of the irony of saying deja vu for France, but this is their was it a 7th bronze medal and
Yeah,
the
they win
3rd
bronze
in
all the time.
successive World Cup. Yeah,
All the time.
So that's it. France haven't made it to a World Cup final yet, for the women at least. Canada have. So we beat you on that. In the long run, we're beating you on that run.
Canada beat France in France to get to that final too.
Yeah, well, and that shows just how much professionalizing players has had a bit of a turnaround. So when they got to Canada, they're saying, of course, Canada will be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing they focus on is that Rugby Canada, unlike the RFU, unlike Rugby New Zealand or French Rugby, Rugby Canada doesn't have anywhere near the resources of those other three teams. So they are reliant on making the most of the time they have together in and around major tournaments. But an interesting thing I looked at was also the United States, because they reached the quarterfinals, but only ended with just one win against Japan and comfortable defeats to Italy and Canada twice. They need to halt a possible slow decline and retaliation. Though there was some positive performance, core reality is that this year was their worst ever World Cup finish. And if unchecked, they could slip well below 7th in 2025. But this is got me thinking. So I'd say I'm saying the United States as well, but obviously mainly Canada. What I think Rugby Canada need to do with their limited resources they have is take, let's say 10 players, 10 women's national team players. And, we can give them contract, like out of season contracts. And the focus of Rugby Canada should be getting in touch with Premier 15s teams, Elite 1 teams in France, Super Rugby and Nuki teams in New Zealand, and just trying to get any of their players contracts so that they can play in professional environments for as long as possible during the year. Now, obviously, players like Sophie de Goody and Taylor Perry, and
there's a lot of players. Are you about to list all the players that play in England right now?
But so I was saying that I was using those as an example because whilst they were at university and because of COVID, they went over and played for a short time until only for like a season contract, and then they came back, continued studies, etc., etc. So Canada. That's what I'm saying. Get obviously as many players as possible, but maybe have 10 that you just have like on out of season contracts. These are the players that will be between summer internationals and the end of year tests. They will be on contracts to be like, you are mandated to do this rest time. You have to be in off-season training for this period of time, so that we can not only make you better players for Canada, but also better players for your respective teams wherever they are in the world. And
why only 10?
I say 10 just because of their limited availability of finances. Like, obviously, now if money was no object, I'd say professionalize 50 of them. Let's get them ready to go. But I'm just saying for the time being, this is like the bare minimum. But when after 2025, we now have 8 years until the USA hosts their World Cup in 2033. So they'll need to be doing something, and Canada can benefit of it, of making a continual professional presence. And as much as I want to say like, oh, take MLR and make it women's only, I don't think that would work. But something that could work is the women's version of SLAR. So having a national team, so Selknam for Chile has helped the Chilean men's national team go from strength to strength to strength. So if we were to have at least one Canada team, basically like the women's version of Pacific Pride, I'd say, and have the women's version of the American Raptors, and they're playing in competition with a women's team from Argentina, a women's team from Chile, a women's team from Brazil, and if there's enough funding and resources, maybe there's 2 Canadian teams or 2 women's American Raptors and stuff like that. So that just gives these players more time more time with each other, and these are the players that they'll be playing with come international call-up and things like that. So it's not going to be as big as, say, MLR, where there's 12 teams going, but maybe having like 8 teams between North America and South America, and having regular competition in a professional environment, I think that would do dividends as well. But that's just my idea. If you want a fully in-depth thing, pay me as well as the players.
Well,
So
I think in general, like, I mean, I agree with the general idea of like get them professionalized and stuff. I don't know, like, if like the thing is, it's like the Canadian women's team is I think it's different than the men's team, right? And it's like you don't necessarily want them playing Uruguay and Chile because they're on the level of England and New Zealand, right? So it's
yeah.
like you probably want them playing at that level of competition a lot more regularly, which I guess is something they're doing. Like, we need to have, like, what is it, the Pacific Four tournament and stuff.
Well, it's the Pacific Four that feeds into the WXV.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So the WXV, yeah. So that's a bigger women's season. So that's obviously going to be a positive thing.
but that is only at international level. So
That's
that
fine.
will, yeah, but at a cumulative total, that's about like what 10 weeks of the year, if that.
Yeah, and then you go, well, I mean, that's not like
that's not even 10 weeks. That's probably going to be more like
how,
6.
well, it's however many weeks it is, it's going to be more than what it is now. But it's like, so you would probably do that, and then you play like your, Premier 15 season or whatever, right? So that's also more time. You do that. And then yeah, maybe like come up as Sophie Goody and Kevin Rouge have been harping on, is just playing more games and stuff. So there's obviously ways to do that. I think the thing is, like, there's probably going to be a ton of suggestions about how to go about playing all of those games, right? And I just hope, like, I hope it's all possible, but I'm also like, kind of like, the resources to do this aren't going to just come out of thin air. And I think, like, we still have to figure out how to get those resources in. Again, going back to the whole thing, this team clearly deserves it. Right. So there's got to be like you kind of need, like, you need it, it's not just that you need more games, and more games. The more resources that come in have to also make it like feasible to constantly be playing more games, even if it is just like a super long international season, or if you kind of do want to kind of branch off and maybe have like a couple, I don't know, some like a little mini club competition, even if it's just within Canada. You can maybe, I don't know, you can maybe go like on, East Coast versus West Coast kind of thing or something. Just to be able to keep playing games or whatever. That's going to be good. Or, work out more international competitions with, things like the Pacific Fours or the women's XV, which I'm kind of trying to remember what they said that tournament would actually be at the moment. But it's, yeah, I think the World Cup as well definitely show that there's an appetite for women's rugby at the highest level too. Obviously the final at Eden Park sold out again. Right. And looks to be some killer ratings on TV, and looks like a lot of people watched it. A lot of like social media posts and stuff. A lot of, like, even in Canada, seeing a lot of places that don't necessarily cover rugby too regularly are posting about it. So it's like that kind of stuff. So it looks like there's a lot of positive momentum. And like I said, that's like earlier, it's like, as far as the resource things go, it's not just on like Rugby Canada or any of the other individual unions. Like, World Rugby needs to dive into this head first, right? Because it's like, this sport seems like, the women's side of this sport seems like it's ready to like burst at the seams as far as like the popularity and everything of it goes. And if you can just turn like the Premier 15s or something into an absolutely elite like Northern Hemisphere league that has players from across, say, the Six Nations, and across from the Six Nations, and then a lot of players from Canada and the USA mixed in there too. Make that like a little bit of an elite competition. Maybe it'd be cool too. It's like, I mean, if you want to like grow it, do some marketing. You can, even if the Premier 15s want, like, I don't know, pick like who's the teams that are going to have the most Canadians and Americans on them? Saracens and Exeter, come play a game in Toronto or something. Like, or like New York or wherever, kind of branch out like that. Again, that's expensive. Where are those resources coming from? It's something we have to figure out, because it's not going to come out of thin air, despite how much in the aftermath of the World Cup everybody's talking about. We need to fund women's rugby more and stuff, but we need to actually as we need to take that excitement and actually do something to contribute to the funding of women's rugby more instead of just talking about it, right?
Yeah, makes sense. But that is something for the higher ups to understand. Obviously, we'll keep championing for women's rugby and women's rugby in Canada. So, yeah, we're hoping that the momentum can continue not only to 2025, but also to the long-term future of rugby as a whole. Okay, so we are going to move on from the bronze final to apparently like the gold final. Apparently, with these two nobodies who aren't important. The host New Zealand versus undefeated England. But this is Eden Park, an absolute fortress for all of New Zealand rugby. The men's team haven't lost there since like 1996, I believe. And the women's team having their longest unbeaten run at home. And, it's Eden Park and it's a fortress, and it's the fortress that won out because the final score, New Zealand 34, England 31. England got a red card early in the game and it looked like they could be out of it, but they kept their fight in as long as they could. But eventually it was the Black Ferns once again to lift their now 6th Rugby World Cup, and they have defended their win from 2017. This also means that England's match winning streak ends at 30. This is the longest in history for both men or women. Yeah. And this match is the 5th Rugby World Cup final to feature both New Zealand and England, and they have all been won by the Black Ferns. So congratulations to New Zealand. You're defending your Rugby World Cup win, lifting the Kathy Flores Cup, as I'm calling it. Everyone,
has that caught on yet?
It'll catch it. I'm sure. I've reached out to Squidge Rugby, checks in the post, and he'll be mentioning it, I'm sure, in due time. But congratulations to New Zealand, commiserations to England, and you gotta be grateful for New Zealand rugby and the Black Ferns. Yeah. This has been the biggest women's World Cup to date. Mm-hmm. And it's not the end, it's just the springboard of things to come, as the Scrum Queens have mentioned. So New Zealand, you got to keep the momentum going in terms of marketing. England, this is a very painful knock, but you can keep professionalizing your players. You can keep growing the game in the UK. Obviously, the Six Nations is only just a few months away, and they'll be looking to secure another Grand Slam. And it's just the beginning of where professional women's rugby can go. And I, for one, am excited to see where it ends up.
Yeah.
Now, we got to leave New Zealand, unfortunately. We are going to the Netherlands, specifically Amsterdam, because the Canadian men's 15s team were taking on the Netherlands for the first time ever. Now, Canada are ranked higher than the Netherlands, but as we've known, unfortunately, over the past few years, that doesn't really evaluate too much. So, we're going into this game pretty blind. As I said, this is the first time they've played each other. Never happened before, and held at the National Stadium in Amsterdam. This is a surprisingly large turnout. I feel it's surprising for me because you had to wake up early to watch this game. But obviously for the Dutch rugby supporters, there was a lot of support going on. Lots of young guys and old guys in blazers watching the game, enjoying the rugby. And, it seemed that it was a great atmosphere going on. It took first score was Cooper Coates from the tee to get the first penalty of the game, but then Leiden from the Netherlands scored 2 penalties in quick succession. That gave them the lead. And then shortly after that, we had the first try of the game scored by the boss himself, Ross Brodie. Fantastic to see him scoring tries again. And it's very not even, because obviously the score wasn't that close, but very tempered, I'd say, in the first half. It was
the score was super even in the first half.
Yeah, well, it was half time. It was 13-all, so that's why I said even in the first half, but tempered probably until I'd say the 50th minute. Everything was no one really wanted to go too far and make a mistake because both teams knew the other could capitalize on it. But at the 50th minute mark, we had Lindsay Stevens going over for his first international try for Canada. He only got his first cap again in the game against Belgium. So, if he gets a try every 3 games, then it could be one of the top try scorers for top forwards for Canada as well. About 10 minutes later, it was a try for Lucas Rumble. And the thing is like just before he scored that try, I saw him, looking a little bit drained, a little bit woozy, and that's the thing. I'm thinking like, oh, maybe we should get Rumble off, as soon as possible. He's, it's all smoke and mirrors. Once he got his hand on that ball, it was like unable to be stopped. And of course, Rumble, as soon as you're there down on the ground and he's got his hands over you, it's already too late. The number of breakdown steals he has just keeps going up and up. It's great to see. And then Josh Larson got his try to make it 4 for Canada in the 67th minute. And all these tries, by the way, that I mentioned, have all been converted by Cooper Coates, who was immaculate from the tee. Didn't all go according to plan, especially in, I'd say, like the final 10 minutes when the Netherlands scored 2 tries by Wagermaker and Wirenga within like 5 minutes of each other. Now, Coates did get a penalty to make it the final score. Canada 37, Netherlands 25. But I don't know. I think Canada knew that they had won the game, and unfortunately, they just like stepped their foot off the gas pedal and allowed Netherlands just to come in and get those 2. I'll say easy scores to make the scoreline a lot more competitive than it actually was. But a win's a win's a win. So I was watching this game in parts, unfortunately, because I had double booked at the time. So
I caught this. I actually caught this as a replay too. I do, unfortunately, but irritatingly, I got more of the Dutch tries than of the Canadian tries. But I did get. So you should stop watching games. That's what the problem's been.
Yeah, but that's
I was doing fine before you started watching their games.
Well, I did also get to see Larson's try as well. So, it's 50-50. But, it was...
Still blaming you.
Whatever eases your mind. But, I think this is a good game because,
I actually really like this game.
In the past few years on the pod, we've been saying that, Canada facing, England or Wales or any of the big teams, it's just for... ticket sales and the bank balance, but they need to be getting like positive results. They need to be beating teams as well. And this is exactly what I want to see from a European tour, especially with the World Cup next year. Games are going to be fewer. They're just going to be fewer because there'll be like some warm-up games for definitely like Uruguay and Chile. Are they going to be against Canada? Are they going to be against other teams as well? I've no idea what Canada's going to do next summer. So, getting these results in now seems like a great shout. And like the venue itself was pretty good. The camera work was, enjoyable to watch at places. Obviously, it's like 2 camera setups, so wide and narrow. And I think there was a bit of an issue going from one to the other and then missing a little, unable to see passing and stuff like that, but enjoyable for what it was. And obviously, and Dutch rugby itself has been coming along with the the Europe Super Cup, I believe it is. The Delta is the Dutch team representing that. So pleasant to see Netherlands come along, but always good to see Canada get a win under their belts.
Yeah, and I actually really enjoyed this game. Because to be honest with you, like I think I enjoyed it for a couple of reasons. And one, it's nice to see some guys like Klimchuk and Botcher and Mora picking up, and Connor Young as well, picking up their first caps. It's always nice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like congrats to all those guys getting their first caps in this one. Um, right. And that's obviously just on that alone, that has been something that we've been saying we want to see, right? You want to because I mean, like whether they're not here for due to injuries or like a selection choice or whatever. There's a lot of good Canadian players that are not on this tour.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely one of those things that we've been saying that we really want to see, is like we want to see the next sort of generation kind of coming in, playing games, getting some caps under their belt. And so just before the game even kicks off, and I mean, after the game kicks off, so there's a handful of those guys came off the bench. But it's just nice to see the line. I like the lineup that Kingsley Jones went with for this game. A little bit of a veteran mix, young guys that have a couple of caps but haven't necessarily played a lot, mixed in with the four guys getting their first cap. So that was nice to see. The game itself, so one of the things that I think we have like exhausted ourselves talking about on this podcast, especially in the Canadian attack, is a lot of box kicking,
Mm-hmm.
but also an inability to adapt to things. And watching this game was actually really nice because of that. And in the first half, I think I felt a handful of like those frustrations come back. Brody was, I mean, there was some good try. Brody's try, great try. Well worked. It was a great try. But like there was moments in the game where it's like, okay, like, box kicking on like every time they got the ball, maybe 2 or 3 phases. And they would box kick, and evidently Peter Leiden would get the ball, and Leiden, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I watched the Netherlands national team very often. But it took me 2 minutes to be like, Peter Leiden is the best player on this team. It did not take long to figure that out. And he was unreal in the first half. And for some reason, Canada kept being like, let's keep giving him the ball. Right. So what I did love, because it's like there was a handful of kicking, there was a lot of or most of the kicking exchanges in the first half was Canada kicking the ball, Peter Leiden getting it, kicking it back, and flipping the pitch on them. There was Canada came out on the wrong end of a lot of kicking exchanges in this game. And Peter Leiden was a big part of that. So right, and obviously we go into halftime, it's 13-13. Canada comes out in the second half. And as I said, it took me 2 minutes to figure out that was the best player. I'm assuming it took Canada even less time. But Canada comes out in the second half and they don't do any of that again. Leiden in the second half, I think even at one point the commentators mention it when he actually does get the ball, that he's been pretty much like neutralized for the whole second half, not having the same impact. Canada's holding on to the ball a lot more, running. Like there's there was a set of plays where they were playing like so expansive with the ball. Like they went like widthwise across the field like 3 or 4 times on their way down to the, deep inside the Dutch line, right? They started playing a lot more expansive. They were holding the ball. They stopped, kicking the ball away or doing the box kicks that were they identified that as like, especially with what Leiden was doing, it was like this, it's not working. So they come out in the second half, change it up. The attack is mixed up because I think part of the first half too, the attack was very, let's say predictable, or like stagnant. Second half, guys are running different lines to the ball. Thiel's a lot more involved. Lesage is a lot more involved. Mora's coming off his wing a lot more. Coe's coming off his wing a little bit. Coates knows what is injecting himself in spots that he wasn't doing it in the first half. right? And Brody or Higgins when he came in too, were doing very well with the ball distribution. I did mention I thought Povey at 10, second half much better with the ball, making his passes were crisp. He was putting guys through gaps. Right. And they knew when to go to Thiel instead of Povey to kind of spread out the Dutch defense a little bit more. That stuff, and I'm like, this is so much nicer to watch.
Yeah.
But it's also nice to just be like, there's an adjustment that got made and it worked.
Yeah.
Right. And it worked really well. And then obviously too, man, I mean, like you get down to the line, a lot of these tries that were scored, at the backs of, some nice line out mauls. Really liked the one that led to that Lindsay Stevens try, which I believe is the first try of the second half. Nice little maul variation where they had Bailey in the back and then he runs forward. So Larson runs back behind him. Bailey goes up, gets the ball, and then passes it back down to Larson to kind of change where the maul, where the maul's actually going to be coming in from, which worked out really well. And Stevens obviously scored that try. The forwards did really well just with the ball retention too. Which I think is part of the adjustment, is like the adjustment of not kicking as much works because the forwards did a great job with their ball retention in this game, and especially when it got two scoring opportunities, right? Like both Larson's and Rumball's try, lots of pick and goes and stuff there, right? Until they eventually got over and scored. Which was a great way to score in rugby. And it was really nice too. Like, I mean, I thought Connor Young when he came in, I'll circle back. So I loved all those things. Circle back to the guys with their first caps. I thought Mora played great. Coming off his wing. Connor Young, really high work rate and stuff. Liked seeing that from the prop. Botcher and Klimchuk, I also thought when they came in, they did pretty well at the breakdowns and stuff too. They were, made a couple tackles, had a nice little impact in the game. And I mean, I think only real criticism coming back to the end, and it's as you kind of mentioned, 2 tries in the last 5 minutes. Brings the scoreboard to make it look a little bit closer than what it was in reality. But at the end of the day, that's it is obviously a younger team. But you would like to see those get closed out a little bit more, a little bit more effectively. But that's the only real complaint. Like, I think, like, so I guess to sum up, I loved the halftime adjustments that got made. Because I mean, that's been something that we've been harping on for a long time. And I love that there was the attack was a little bit more varied, and there was a little bit more, they showed the Dutch something that they didn't in the second half. They showed the Dutch something that they didn't see in the first half. And I think that is basically, that's what won the game. It was a tied game at halftime, right? And like those adjustments, I think, are what won the game. So, good on Canada for doing that, man. It was a nice win.
Yeah, and it's going to be more of the same next week because Canada are playing. They're playing in Amsterdam, but they are playing a much, much tougher opponent. It is the long overdue 2019 World Cup match that we've been waiting for. It is Canada versus Namibia. Now, Canada, with their victory over the Netherlands, they did rise to 21st in the world. But Namibia have also risen as well. They are currently 23rd in the world. So while they are still below Canada, I should also point out Chile are currently below Canada as well, and they are going to the World Cup, as is Namibia. So this is going to be a much tougher occasion. And, Namibia obviously will be trying to continue and build some momentum. I know the World Cup's a year out, but it's, something that they want to do on an international level. But Canada, as they said, they're going to need to adapt to their plan. Their attacking style in the second half was far, far better than what we've seen in a lot of men's 15s games for Canada. So I'm hoping they can continue that. And if it doesn't work, I hope they can adapt as well. But that game will be available on tsn.ca or the TSN app. and that kicks off at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time this Saturday, which will be the 19th, November 19th. All right, great. Right, so we've been to New Zealand, we've been to Europe. I think it's time to come back home because, as we said at the start of the show, we have a lot of MLR news that has been announced as of today because we are recording on Tuesday, November 15th. So let us begin. We're going to start with the Arrows specifically because last week they announced the re-signing of 2 foreign forwards and they are coming back for another season. Isaac Salmon and Alani Fa'aleva are back for more as they have re-signed with the Toronto Arrows for MLR 2023. Isaac Salmon, the forward of the year for the Arrows last year. Alani Fa'aleva, scored 4 tries, I believe, in his inaugural season, and so many carries, so many line breaks as well. Growing into being the role of a fan favorite, especially when he comes off the bench, it's just like great to see. And obviously with the departures that have happened with Cole Keefe and Andrew Cotrin, having these guys back, it gives a bit of reassurance in that front row, especially. So, welcome back, Isaac. Welcome back for Lalani.
Yeah, I mean it's nice. It's most of the pack seems to be returning. Obviously, those guys made huge impacts last year, right? And Salmon proved to be kind of, as you said, forward of the year from the team, right? So unreal scrummager, and when the ball's in play too, everything about his game's great. Fa'aleva, so much fun to watch. Dude's a wrecking ball. It's whenever he gets the ball in his hands, man, it pulls people out of their seats. So great to have him back too.
Yeah, well,
maybe starting this year. No Cole Keefe.
Yeah,
maybe starting one jersey. What are we thinking for him?
I don't know. Well, that's the thing. You say he's obviously made an impression with the fans. Definitely made an impression with the staff as well. And I think it'll be interesting to see. I think one of the issues I had with Fa'aleva is that obviously after he would make a line break and then make 40, 50 meters. You would then see him very clearly gassed after that. It's like every ruck arrival and stuff like that was a little bit slower, and I'm like, you know what? Okay, you were a wrecking ball, and you did help us get a try. So
you being overly critical for no reason right now.
Yeah. I know I'm being overly critical, but that was also like in the summer. He may very well have this offseason, this MLR offseason, been told, yeah, we like you doing line breaks. We want you to do more of them. Would you just focus on this and stuff? And he may come back and he may be like an absolute superstar on the field, making the MLR. Well, it's making the MLR 15 week in, week out. No one can touch him, both literally and figuratively.
I guess is it between him and Grindal, I guess, starting loosehead right now? Because you got Roland and Salmon left or on the tight head side, right? So
yeah,
I guess it's him and Grindal as of right now, based on who's been announced.
Him. He gets first pick because of I just know who he is. So.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. Yeah. A couple other arrows, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe that's kind of sort of got added to the team.
Okay. So that's
a weak draft transition there. I need to do better, but
you're working on it. You'll get there.
So it was. Post.
Yeah. So we now move on to the combined dispersal draft and expansion draft, and these are the there have been rumored results by the Rugby Wrap Up podcast. So thank you to those guys. It's also been done further by America's Rugby News, and they say while the results were not publicly released, ARN has now confirmed the selections as seen in their article. So
I think before we get into it, huge shout out to Rugby Wrap Up and
that
Matt McCarthy, Brian Ray from America's Rugby News too. Because this was awesome. Definitely a thing that we probably knew the league wouldn't necessarily say anything about, and I don't even know if they've officially acknowledged the dispersal draft and things on any of their websites or their social medias yet either. But it's stuff that I believe it is stuff that fans really want to see. And Matt McCarthy, Rugby Wrap Up, and then America's Rugby News and Brian Ray. Just one of those things that's just like, you got to applaud it, man. Well done on bringing this news to all the MLR fans.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. So this was how the expansion draft worked. Or should I say dispersal. This is how the dispersal draft worked, and that round 1, 3, 4, and 5 would begin with 2 picks for Chicago, then the picks for the remaining 11 teams in MLR, as well as Chicago. So, for example, the draft order for round 1 was Chicago, followed by Chicago, then NOLA, Dallas, Houston, Toronto, Chicago again, San Diego, ATL, Houston, New England, Seattle, New York, and Chicago and Chicago. So of those 15 picks, 5 were for Chicago, and the remaining picks were for the 10 teams that opted to take place in the draft. It is reported that Old Glory DC decided not to participate. So that's how the draft schedule had worked out. Round 2 was the expansion draft. So this is exclusively for Chicago. So 10 picks for them. And then for round 3, we follow similar format. 2 picks for Chicago, 5 MLR teams.
The reverse order of what you already said.
Yes. So the reverse order, another pick for Chicago, the 5 remaining MLR teams, 2 picks for Chicago. Then we get to rounds 4 and 5, and this is where fewer teams announce their picks. So
it's the same order.
Same order, but
dropped out.
Yeah. So in the 4th round, Toronto, San Diego, Atlanta, Houston, New England, Seattle, and New York, they didn't announce any picks. And then in the final round, it was New York, Seattle, New England, Houston, Atlanta, San Diego, and Toronto, and Dallas announced no new picks. So let's go through and let's talk about who Toronto did pick.
Let's do the arrows first, and then we'll do the rest of Canada, and then maybe
that's it. So according to this draft, the Arrows have drafted Lindsay Stevens from LA, who was their 6th pick in the first round, and from Austin, they picked Kyle Breitenbach, and he was the 35th pick overall, and the Arrows' 2nd pick in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
So Lindsay Stevens, hooker, has scored a try this weekend for Canada. So Canadian fully, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't look at where he was born. Don't need to worry about that. So I think that's a great pick. And as you mentioned, anything that can strengthen the the front row is always good. Yeah. Kyle Breitenbach is an interesting pick. He is a South African-born player that plays both lock and flanker.
U.S. eligible,
but he is U.S. eligible, which kind
of
a domestic goes player against. He is a domestic player, so
that's big. That's important.
While he hasn't been capped by the United States, he has played for the USA Selects. I don't think or know for certain if that actually makes him a US confirmed player, like
the important thing
team kind of thing.
The most important thing is that the MLR would consider him a domestic player. That's the most important thing.
I think that is the most important thing. Something to mention though is that these draft picks are currently going through
they have to actually be signed.
Negotiation period. So while they have been drafted, they have not been signed by any team.
It's basically every team just owns the rights to these players now.
Yeah.
Right. And then they can go back, I guess, by December 1st, if I understand this correctly.
Yeah, it's
if they're not signed by December 1st, they might go back to their old teams.
Yeah, I think the only exception is former LA or Austin players which have been drafted to Chicago.
Yeah.
Because obviously they don't technically have a team to go back to. So
none of the LA and Austin guys have teams to go back to.
That is true.
I guess I'm not sure what.
But if Chicago has drafted them, that means that they have a 2-week negotiation period. If they can't come to terms on anything, then the players can look to other teams for a negotiating period of an extra week. And if they still can't determine something by then Chicago will retain their player rights.
So
yeah.
I was gonna say, I think like I like the picks from the Arrows. I think they're interesting. I think Old Glory kind of perplexing. I'm not sure why you would not want to participate in this. Just because I mean it's a crack. We don't really know what the official rules are, I guess. I mean, everybody's kind of going off, maybe things based on what say the USRPA has been saying, or so I don't really know how these players are being applied to salary cap and things underneath the rules yet. But
but as you said, nothing's been officially released by the league. So
I do exactly, that's true, right? And I mean, going for everybody, it's they still do have to actually sign. So who knows how many of these guys are actually going to end up on the team that they rugby wrap up is reporting that they ended up on. But I just for the sake of the podcast or whatever, I like the Lindsay Stevens pick. Right. I do. Just because, and I know there's a couple really talented Canadian players and stuff that went after Stevens as well. But I think Stevens, looking at the roster that the Arrows have released publicly so far, the only hooker on the squad as of right now that is as like I said that has been announced. The only hooker on the squad that's been announced right now is Gene Cemented. Right. So that's the only hooker. So it's that's obviously you need more hookers. Quatrin's obviously gone to New England via Utah. And hopefully McRogers is back. I really like McRogers, so I would hope to see him. But obviously you need at least 3 hookers on your team. So looking at that, Stevens makes perfect sense. He's a Canadian player. That's obviously been a thing that the Arrows have really made a big part of their identity. So that pick, both on positional fit, Stevens' skill set, and maybe kind of the ethos of the Toronto Arrows, I think that pick makes a ton of sense. Breitenbach I find interesting. He's obviously an incredibly talented player. Counts as a domestic player, which would be great. Which is great too, because you don't have to burn that one of those 8 foreign player slots that the Arrows have. The only thing that's the thing that to me is interesting is that he is a lock and flanker. He's a good one too. But right now you look at the locks, we got Shepherd, Torrance Reed, Wadden, and Flesh signed. Obviously there's a couple more guys that maybe we're waiting on to hear if they're going to come back. I would love to see Paul Cialini back for one off the top of my head. Right. But we'll see what happens still. I'm just going based off the roster that we have so far that they've announced. So you have that, and then the back row right now, you have O'Neill, Rumball, Rutten, Edie, and Larson. And it's that, especially the back row, that is loaded. So that is they just drafted another. So I guess they just drafted another lock flanker. And those are some really deep positions. So I'm interested to kind of see. Well, again, one, obviously the first thing, if Breitenbach actually ends up signing here. But then 2, how it's kind of utilized, because it's how it's kind of utilized. And man, I think Arrow's training camps can be fascinating from 4 to 8. Because that's a lot of competition. That is incredibly deep. And like I said, it's just even in this conversation right now, we're naming some guys that it's it'd be nice to see. Like I said, it'd be nice to see Paul Cialini back. He's not included yet, right? So I don't know if he's coming back. I hope he is. But Breitenbach, that's that's deep. The Arrows are deep from 4 to 8 right now. So interesting to see how he fits in.
Leads to my theory is that Breitenbach may be traded for a player in a different position, maybe with salary cap going either way or whatever. But for a player in different position. After all, some Canadian players have been announced for other teams, and they may be in need of. I was about to say New York, but they've started to announce their teams for 2023, so
Yeah,
I can't
finally.
really get ahead of himself. But let's actually have a look at the Canadians or the Canadian eligible players that have been drafted to other teams. So Stevens was the first by Toronto, and then followed up in the 11th pick is Ben Lesage, who has been drafted to New England. 18th pick was DTH Van der Merwe, who has been drafted to Chicago. Justice Duru, the 30th pick, has been drafted to New England. Corey Thomas, 34th pick, has been drafted to San Diego. Nick Taylor, the 42nd pick, has been drafted to Chicago. And Kainoa Lloyd, the 57th pick, has been drafted to Chicago as well. So Corey Thomas is actually moving the least. He's just going a bit further down the coast to San Diego from LA.
Interesting, too. Corey Thomas playing the same position as Breitenbach went the pick before Breitenbach.
Yeah, I think
also
that
interesting.
now that as in like if only we had like access to like a multiverse.
I mean, I'm not saying the Arrows would have picked Thomas or anything. I'm not trying to apply that either. I just find that's interesting how that works out, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
He's one pick away.
All these players have been drafted to other teams. So but I think I remember reading somewhere is that if a player opts not to sign for the team that they were drafted to, and so this doesn't include Chicago, is that they can't then play for another MLR team until halfway through the 2023 season.
I believe it is that there's a date, there's like a cutoff, and then you can talk to all the other teams. And then if you're still not signed, your rights go back to Chicago.
No, this is the non-Chicago teams.
Oh, for the
players that weren't drafted to Chicago.
So the players that weren't drafted to Chicago, but they can go back to their other teams because they're all from LA and Austin.
Yeah, so if Lesage or Sears Duru or Thomas are unable to negotiate a contract with their new teams, they wouldn't be eligible to sign for another team until
they still get a period or whatever. You had to, if you were declared for the draft, was how you avoid. My understanding of it, anyways, is by declaring for the draft, you avoided that. Like, I can't play for half a season. So a guy like, America's Rugby News has like a little list of the guys that either didn't get drafted or opted out, and I guess we don't really know. But like those guys have to wait until halfway through the season. But you can sign somewhere else after. That's my understanding.
Well, this is the problem when you don't publicize the draft or publicize anything go with the draft. You just have to make it up on the fly, which is what we've done in this situation. So, but yeah, as in, I think it's great to see that New England is firmly Canada South at this point. And it's good to see that these players can hopefully still get a new season in with a new team. I mean, obviously DTH was unable to play due to injury last year, so it'll be great to see him run out for Chicago and see how that works out.
I mean, sorry to cut you off, but I love the New England kind of diving into Canada. All the Canadian players and stuff. But I guess the bigger story though, what do you think of Chicago's squad based off of this?
If they can sign even like
it's good,
75-80% of who they've drafted, they're going to be forced to be reckoned with.
I guess that was one of the things. Like I was like when I looked at the rugby wrap up post. And it was like, because I mean, I guess we're kind of coming like earlier in MLR's history, expansion teams have done really well. Yeah. Right. Toronto and New York both made the playoffs in their first year. Atlanta made the final in their first non-COVID full year. LA obviously beat Atlanta in that final, and that was their first year. Expansion teams have done very well, basically up until the Dallas Jackals, who did the opposite of very well. But like, I guess that's the one thing. It's like and it's something that kind of makes me wonder too, because one of, I guess, the criticisms that I see towards Chicago joining the league is if it's too fast. And
Yeah.
there's a small part, I have no idea who this ownership group is or whatever, but there's a small part of me right now that's wondering if the ownership group was like, if we get in now, we get Austin and LA guys.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like you kind of look at this, right? And it's like the core of the Chicago, whatever they're going to be called,
Yeah.
is the two best teams in the league from last year. That's the core of the team.
Pretty much.
Right? So like I kind of was looking at it based on like who they picked. Like I did a little mock-up starting 15. They picked a lot of domestic players, which is probably the smart move, by the way.
Yeah, that is true.
But you could probably go the front row of Lerome White, Hugh Roach, Charlie Abel. Your second row can be Nathan Denhoy and Luke White. They didn't pick a specialist 8-man, but I'll go with the 3 flankers that they drafted. So Luke Beauchamp, McLean Jones, and Tommy Clark in your back row. Sidney Shoup, scrum half, and then a back line of Luke Carty, Bryce Campbell, and Billy Meeks in the centers. Right, and they still have freaking O'Keefe too. Right, they still have O'Keefe too. That is nasty. And then you got Julian Dominguez. Your wingers right now. If you want to pick between Julian Dominguez, John Ryberg, and DTH Vandermeer, who you want on the wing?
Spoiled for choice.
Yeah, exactly. And then I had Chris Matina as fullback, or Chris Matina as fullback. So, like, dude, that's if these guys do sign, that is nasty.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not even including, like I said, they didn't draft an 8-man, so they got to go find one, whoever that is. Right. It's like they still have positions to load up. This is not a full squad, obviously.
Oh,
so
no,
they can still do that. Yet. And maybe it'll get affected based on who signs. But it's like, as you said, if these guys sign, the Chicago whoever's are looking phenomenal early.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing you want that unfortunately Dallas can provide that year is actually some competition to the league.
Yeah.
And that's it. Well, Dallas may announce a fantastic squad and, finally get a win under their belts as well, which would just be wonderful to see. But we also now know that Chicago will be playing most of their games at SeatGeek Stadium in Chicago because today MLR announced the 2023 schedule and the new season will begin on Friday, the 17th of February, 2023. And one of the games that will kick off the season is the Fire and Ice Cup as Toronto head back to Atlanta, hoping to win the cup for the first time in its history. The Arrows now announced that their bye weeks are rounds 3 and 12, and that they will be playing Chicago, Utah, and Dallas away, and Seattle, Houston, and San Diego at home. And for the remaining Eastern Conference teams, as is tradition, they will be playing them both home and away to give the total of 16 games this season. Derek, we finally know when MLR 2023 will begin. It's a bit later this year, hopefully a longer preseason training camp.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think,
we know when
camp will be great. Looking at the schedule, I guess we got a Friday night, or Friday morning, according to the times on the website, 3 a.m. kickoffs.
I think they're still ironing some things out, but
okay, I'm kidding. But all right, so we're looking at the schedule. So we got Atlanta, like you just said, Fire and Ice Cup. That's Friday night. I'm assuming Friday night. February 17th. That'll kick it off. I just kind of wondering, looking at the schedule, which one, the 12-team league. It's sad to see 2 teams removed from the league. That's never good. A 12-team league works much better than a 13-team league, though. And the structure of the schedule, it's much cleaner. It's much nicer. But so I like that we're returning. We're playing everybody again. That's kind of fun. Right. I like the old format. Looking at the schedule, though, Stu, what game for the Arrows? Just keep it to the Arrows. Keep it simple. What games are you looking forward to? Would it maybe like a top 2, top 3? What are your games you're most excited about?
I'll keep it with the home games for the time being, because obviously there are some I'd say of the away games, it would probably have to be that game against Chicago, just because they're going to be like a
Chicago.
complete unknown.
Yeah.
If they do sign the players that they've drafted, they are going to be incredible to watch.
Yeah.
The first home game is going to be against New York, the defending champions. It'll be the second time they'll have played New York in the season by that point, because the Arrows play New York in the second round as well. Something concerning is that we know very little about Chicago, but we do know that their stadium is SeatGeek. New York still hasn't announced their stadium.
But also,
come on, guys, get on with it. Just find somewhere, just announce it. Let's get it
here's
done.
Here's another side question, though, because we know the MLR for some reason seems to hate the cold. Where do you think that's that? Because then Toronto's got February 26th and March 11th, and March 11th I guess is going to be at SeatGeek Stadium. But where do you think? Do you think there's a chance that New York game might be like a neutral venue? Maybe, because it's like we know the MLR seems to hate the cold.
That is true. But I honestly don't know. That's
I hope
the
it's
thing,
not. I'm going to say this right now. I hope it's not. Play in the cold. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're going to put teams in these cities, play home games in these cities.
Yeah. I think it's good as well is that obviously last year we had the Arrows had the game against LA that was in BC. And especially after having their entire 2021 season in Atlanta, I think fans were a bit miffed to have to lose yet another game to a neutral venue. So the fact that the Arrows faithful are getting 8 games in Toronto next year is something to behold. Nice. So I'd say the big games that I'm looking forward to are obviously the home opener on April 8th against New York. I think as well the game against Atlanta, because I think the Arrows and Atlanta have that friendly rivalry that really brings out like the best in both teams. And then I'd say like the third big one is probably the Arrows' penultimate game of the season against San Diego.
Yeah,
because I remember back in 2020 when it was like Ma Nonu had announced the sign. And at the same time, the Toronto Wolfpack was still around. And it was like, the San Diego's going to come and play at Lamport Stadium on the Saturday. And then the Wolfpack are going to play on the Sunday. So we could have Ma Nonu on the Saturday and
Sonny Bill Williams,
thank you, on the Sunday, and then that didn't happen, and we don't need to talk about why it didn't happen. But
COVID, and then the Wolfpack died.
The Wolfpack got COVID. So
yeah, basically,
either way, I still think a lot of San Diego has been a great team. They've been in a position where the last time they played was in 2021, where San Diego beat the Arrows for the first time.
Yeah,
I'm sure a lot of San Diego fans have a bit of animosity to the Arrows for ending their winning streak in 2019, as well as beating them at home for the first time in a while. And obviously, there's just been that year out because of how everything fell with like a 13-team league. So. Yeah, I think that would be great. And obviously, it is the penultimate game. The good thing is from the calendar is the final 3 rounds, 16, 17, 18. No team has a bye week. So you don't have any team that's waiting to see if they're going to make the playoffs. Every game is all or nothing. So I think that's going to be a real high intensity matchup.
I like
provided it's not at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. Well, like I said, right, it's like I think that's a part of the benefit of the 12 teams and the format that the league uses when it's 12 teams. The only game I kind of agree with a lot of your picks there. The one game I would add though is Saturday, April 15th against the Free Jacks. Just because of all the Canadian players that are on the Free Jacks and a lot of ex-Arrows, that seems like it could be a very spicy game. I will say I actually at work today, just kind of on my phone, scrolling through it during my lunch breaks and stuff. I enjoyed the rollout for the MLR. I think shout out to a lot of teams that made some nice videos, put a lot of effort into the schedule release. That's nice to see. Just specifically because I did enjoy the arrows going with a little bit of Top Gun references, and the schedule release with all the other old-timey planes crashing for all the other teams was pretty funny. I did enjoy that. I think the arrows need to lean into all the Top Gun-ness. I would love to see that this year. So I thought that was good. So I thought that was interesting. I also did like the arrows doing the Chicago beef thing. That's kind of funny. It leads to a bit of could lead to a bigger discussion about what you might want that Chicago team to be called. The other thing that I think was noteworthy that we were kind of talking about, Seattle's got a new logo. They didn't really announce it, but it's kind of
no, it's not really new. It's updated.
It's updated. So different shade of green. The eye on the Orca's green, and instead of saying Seattle Seawolves, it now says Seawolves Rugby. So slight tweak. They didn't really make a big deal out of it, but it is one of those I guess interesting things that I noticed during the schedule release today. So
there's a lot to look forward to. By the time this comes, it'll be about 90 days until the MLR season kicks off. Some players still to be announced, some draftees still to be signed. But get ready, everyone. Rugby's returning to North America. But if you can't wait that long and you have to see some rugby as soon as possible, we've got the places where you can find it. Of course, the Northern Hemisphere is continuing the Autumn Nation Series. That will be available on DAZN, as well as the Canada men's 15s team. They will be playing against Namibia this Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and you can watch that game on tsn.ca or the TSN app. If you like listening to this podcast and would like to listen to more, you can do so on Spotify, Anchor FM, and Apple Podcasts. And if you like watching our beautiful faces and would like to see some other videos that we've recorded with players during the 2022 season, you can do so on our YouTube channel at the Rouge Rugby. In fact, you can find us across all social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at the Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can the fine people find you?
I'm at Brissette the Jet across all social media platforms.
And you can find me mainly on Twitter or Instagram at Hardman, spelled H4RDAN. Well, Derek, I think we're going to end the podcast there. Thank you for talking to me about the unfortunate result of the bronze medal final, the success of the men over the Netherlands, and the exciting MLR news we have. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, focusing on real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.